Dial it up to 11. Democratize the enterprise. I like that. That rhymes. It says provide.
I get that from Richard Wolff.
I know Eric was in his bag when he wrote that one. To provide federal funds and incentives for employee-owned and controlled businesses. Enforcing
That's actually a big one. There's actually a bunch of companies out there, and they'll advertise, "Oh, we're employee-owned," and what they've done is they essentially sold the company to the employees, but they kept the management structure in place as like this zombie management structure, and it's the same board, it's the same manager, and so they're employee quote unquote own, but the employees have no control over the company. And it sounds crazy and weird, but there are companies doing this, and I mean, I guess it's a slight improvement, but just be aware if you see that employee, like you'll say 100% employee owned, ask the question, okay, but is it employee controlled? And more often than not, with these ones that are making these big advertisements about that, it's not. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I've been noticing that.
All right. So good to have you guys with me. Finally, good to have you.
We're back.
Yeah, thank you.
How you doing, JB?
I'm doing good. I got my tea. I'm ready to go. How are you guys doing?
We are well. Hanging out
good.
on the Savvy Show and on the internets and all the things. I hear you got big plans to try to get to Seattle.
Yes, I am definitely trying to get to Seattle. I'm about halfway to my goal so far, raising the money for that. But yeah,
I want everybody to help JB. I'll be throwing some money in there too.
Thank you
Get
so
you to
very
Seattle.
much.
Bring some demands to Seattle, right?
Yeah, some demands and some radical ideas. But yes, that's
Cool.
one of the plans to do when I get there. I won't be there very long because I got to get back. I got dialysis and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's part of the plan. The part of the plan is to make good on that invitation from Dr. Stein and Shama Sawan. So I hope to get there.
Nice.
And hopefully the plane will actually work. So we'll see.
It's very, very likely you'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
No, it always goes fine. Well,
yeah, definitely. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was people don't realize what the 11 demands are. I actually have a playlist on my channel if you guys want to go there for the 11 demands that was really authored and co-authored by Cory and Eric as far as the demands for those of us who are working people. And if you could just give just a really short snippet of what the 11 demands are at first, and then we can get into more of the updates and the tweaks that you have made to the 11 demands so that people can see what they are, and then maybe they can adopt them to whatever strategies they're trying to do, especially within their state, within their city, or if they're trying to do any type of movements nationwide.
Sure. So, I mean, what it kind of starts off with, like if you go to the main page, which is 11demands.org, it's really easy to find. I think these days, if you put 11 demands in the search engine, it even comes up, which is cool. But we kind of start with, both major political parties, those Democrats and Republicans, right? They're both thoroughly corrupt, right? They're serving the interests of those billionaires and those large corporations. And, so that education is really important, getting people to that first step. But then, you got to give people somewhere to go, right? You need that step too. And so the strategy is the idea of how can we make something big out of this? How can we come up with, it's messaging, it's education, it's how do you, to me, that's the key challenge in this. How do you mobilize and inspire literally millions of people to get actually in the streets and saying, this is what we have to have. And, I think that the key central core point in that is the money and the corruption. And, the thing we have is MCDS. There's a nice video up there that people can watch later of Sabby going through it. And the reason I really like to focus on the money and corruption is just it does have such universal appeal, right? If you ask anybody, do you think Congress and our government are corrupt? What are they going to say? Oh, yeah, sure, totally. And so then the question is, how can we get to that next step? What do we do about it? So we call it out and we turn it into a demand, right? What's the demand? Well, the core demand is end the corruption. The core demand is work for us and not the billionaires. So that's a quick overview, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And so just going over some of the MCDS that you have actually here. It says here the 11 demands collective is gathered.
If you go up, if you go up and you can hit, you can click on the MCDS part if you want to do MCDS.
Okay. So simple framework. So it says for understanding how our government really works and how we can fix it. So you have MCDS.
So you have the money runs everything. The corruption, it seems like kind of an obvious thing that yeah, of course they're corrupt, but I'm kind of amazed, first the corruption and the demands. I'm kind of amazed how much people will talk about our politics and how much it works and not actually use the word corruption and not actually call it out directly. And then even beyond that, then when you're doing that, you need the demands. You need to be saying, what do we have to do about it? What's our, what is our demand? And, it's to fix the big money. It's to fix the corruption. And once you get to that point, right, it kind of flows into the solutions. And if you so then bring up like the 11 demands for real democracy. And you see kind of how the demands flow into the solutions. Like if you click on the 11 demands for real democracy, you get right into, the demand is fix the big money. Okay, how do we do that? Well, you need to be passing laws, whether you get your legislators to do them or ballot initiatives for clean elections, for public financing. And you're going to have to fix the Constitution. It's just the Supreme Court's gonna kill anything major we try to do until we fix that.
But Eric, just a question. I thought the Constitution was perfectly written by a bunch of perfect men at a perfect point in time.
Some people call them written by the group of syphilitic slave owners. You put one way, but yeah, the Constitution's been amended before, and we can do it again. But it's going to take a mass movement.
Yeah. Here's the second one: is healthcare for all. So this one is kind of interesting because one of the things that a lot of times we get pushback from, especially from people who are further on the right, is that they'll say, well, we have access to healthcare for everybody in this country. Why is that not enough?
You have access to a Corvette, right?
Well,
but yeah, good luck paying for it. Yeah, I mean, anyone who's had any dealings with the healthcare system, knows that it's a mess, and part of the education is linking that mess to profit, right? Healthcare and profit and privatization, they just don't mix. And the reason we're in this, to put it kindly, crap show that we're in with healthcare is because it's being done for profit. Even the nonprofit carriers, like in Massachusetts, we have a lot of nonprofit insurance carriers like Blue Cross, Harvard Pilgrim, and Tufts, and they're good. I mean, compared to the for-profit ones, they're not horrible, but they become very corporatized. And anyways, it's that idea that you got to get it out of the privatization, the for-profit, and we need to be like demanding at this point when someone says we need Medicare for all, I think I think our response on the real left here should be, why are you demanding a compromise? If you're going to demand something, demand the real thing. Demand, a full up United States national healthcare system that's fully non-privatized, get rid of the profit and do it right and get the billionaires out of it.
So let me ask you this, because I could get the answer, but it may sound, you may be able to explain it in a way that may benefit people who, think more like you. So why is Medicare for all, a single payer healthcare system, not enough in your view? Either you or Cory.
Yeah. Hey, Cory. I think Cory got his internet going better.
I'm on my phone. Yeah, sorry. I just
looks good now.
I just moved into a new place, so I'm still trying to figure out the internet situation.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's, they're almost like Medicare for all and single payer are almost two different things. But the point is, like, how much do you like? We need to make it more like the other countries are doing. Is what it comes down to, and the Medicare for all system only gets you part of the way there. It's even what the seniors have now is getting privatized. It's getting, everything is all pushed into Medicare Advantage, which is basically, an advantage for the insurance companies to be pulling profit money out of it. And so we need something like what I would say is that we should look at what these other countries are doing. And not only emulate it, but emulate the best parts of it and make the best healthcare system in the world. But to do that, it's going to have to not be about profit, not be about corporatization. It's going to have to be about healthcare. It's going to have to be the concept of healthcare as a right and a necessity. I know we've been talking about that. And, running it more like we run like the fire department. Or like we run the post office. It's like we run our public schools when they're run the right way. It's you get the smart people together. You design a system that's about healthcare and not profit. And I believe in America. In terms of I think we can get stuff like that done. But it's going to have to be about the 99% and not the top 0.1%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's got to be a people-led movement. Our government is obviously bought off, and all of us in this space, know this, but, it has to be, from the community, by the community, for the community.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. When I think about, and I just want to stick on the healthcare aspect for a second, when you talk about a full nationalization of the healthcare system, I think of single payer as basically being the government being a health insurance versus a healthcare provider. And if you were to nationalize it versus being single payer, that would be like, single payer is like, instead of having the United States Postal Service, we'll just have the United States pay for everybody's parcels, and they'll pay to UPS, FedEx, DHL, Amazon, right? Where it's like, yeah, they're paying for it, but DHL, UPS, FedEx, Amazon, they can charge like obscene amounts to the government, which we still end up paying for. Even though it's collective now, we still end up paying for it. And they're charging us for a premium for obscene profits, or it could be towards the pharmaceutical industry for obscene profits, or to hospitals, or to medical device manufacturers, or nursing homes. And they're making these obscene profits off of our government. Because technically, if you want to think about it, we do have single payer military manufacturing, because we pay into our government and the government pays for the military, but that money goes to private corporations. And then you have a military industrial complex. I don't want any industrial complex, period. And so I'd rather us literally have control completely over the medical industry instead of it being in private hands. even if the government is a single payer, they're still going to, try to pull as much from the government as possible, which I don't like. So for me personally, I think that it would be best to have a nationalized healthcare system. And to the people who always say, well, if you give everybody universal healthcare, that means that, well, let me ask you this. What do you say to people who say, well, if you give universal healthcare, then that's going to mean that doctors, nurses, and medical personnel are just going to be slaves? What do you say to that? Because I honestly think that it is very infantile thinking. But what do you say?
Yeah, well, I mean, are the firefighters slaves? Are the cops? The postal workers? It's certainly not a radical thing to have people, simply on the government payroll. It's this whole concept of government as the other. We need to think of government as the expressed will of the people, and not as some otherized force. But the other thing I'd say in general is that people will like to frame these things as oh, that's so big and radical, we could never do that. And it doesn't have to happen all at once. Like the way these things can happen as a process. We can start having essentially government or state run facilities and hospitals. Right now we've got hospitals failing. I mean, even here in Massachusetts, we just had these steward hospitals that, stewards going bankrupt, and these hospitals are like left hanging.
Well, yeah, 3 of them closed permanently. Yeah.
And the state could have taken those over for the cheap, and then just start running a state system, and we could start doing it in parallel. Like, these things have answers that in ways that it could be done. So we could start doing these things. We could do the same thing with Big Pharma. I mean, Big Pharma, of course, it needs huge, revolutionary radical reforms. I mean, we need to be breaking those companies up. We need price controls. I mean, there's a long list of things to do with Big Pharma, but among the things you could do would be to just start having government nationalized pharmaceutical companies, organizations. You could start breaking them up, and you could reform them into worker co-ops, democratically run. That's a whole nother part of this. I mean, you could have a hospital that's a worker co-op. I mean, there are, really good answers to these things. We have to, just allow ourselves the space to think about them. And then the other thing I'd say is that none of this stuff happens until we decorrupt our government. So it always goes back to, this is part of a theme I really want to hit with all this stuff, is it always goes back to not having a corrupt government. And MCDS, we always are gonna have to come back to that solution of that fix. But these things are possible.
Yeah, thank you so very much for that. Just want to move on to the next one. This one is the 3 minimum standard of living for everyone. It says, make the minimum wage a real living wage, provide housing for all, plus about housing first programs, create public food pantries, implement federal jobs guarantees, protect Social Security, mandate parental leave, sick days, eliminate student loan debt, free public college, ban predatory lending, and enact a real debt relief for the 99%. So this is pretty much, self-explanatory as far as a minimum standard of living for everyone. For the most part.
Yeah, and I'd say don't just demand the minimum wage, demand the minimum standard of living. Comprehensive in what you're demanding. Dial it to 11, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just on a base level, just decommodifying, the basic necessities of life, so, food, water, housing, healthcare, education, job opportunities, those are things that should be just viewed as an inalienable right of anybody that's in this country.
So, to expand on what you just said, Cory, it's basically taking the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness and then kind of flow charting it into, okay, so what is essential for life? Food, water, clothing, shelter, basically these, simple things. So by us having a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then that means you have to have a right to these basic things that enable or facilitate life to happen.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And then, of course, we land on that. We have to demand that and organize it and be prepared to take to the streets or strike or not support people in power until those demands are met.
Okay. Me likey. I like that. All right. So let's move on to Fort in the Wars. This one's pretty self-explanatory too. You've given a lot of different facts about the war, especially in all governments that engage in support of all governments that engage in settler colonialism. This actually makes me think about the Leahy Law that I talked about a few days ago. If you guys have not, then
yeah, and if you read that line and you think, if you read that line and you think Israel, yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I'm just like Leahy, like Patrick Leahy was, you know, he wrote that bill, you know, like rent was due. So that's
You would
one
think
thing
it would be a simple thing, right? An obvious, non-controversial thing. You know, we can't be supporting governments that engage in things like genocide and oppressive things. But no, we do.
Yeah. I mean, isn't Benjamin Netanyahu stateside right now, basically, you know, trying to grab, you know, some more cash out of our treasury in order to be able to commit more atrocities? And it's kind of funny how, well, you know, we have enough money to maim and murder people, but we don't have enough money to save and preserve life.
Yeah, I mean, Netanyahu walks around Washington like he owns the place.
Mm-hmm. But I also want to connect it in to like the real reason, like Netanyahu himself isn't getting all that money. Israel itself or Ukraine itself, they don't get all that money. Yeah. You know, they get a nice, you know, cut of it and whatnot. Like, you know, like the boys in any good mafia organization, but the real money goes to the bosses. You know, the real money goes to the house. Every bomb that's dropped, you know, on a kid's head in Gaza and in Israel, you know, or in Ukraine, every weapon system is huge profits for that MIC, military industrial complex defense contractors. That's what these things are really about. And I think that's a key insight that we need to educate people on. Is that, you know, it isn't about like giving, you know, why are we giving all this money to Ukraine and Israel? Well, no, this is a transfer of wealth of federal dollars to the billionaires, right? Who owns the MIC, who owns the defense contractors, the biggest shareholders and controllers, the billionaires. That's what this stuff is really about. And it's allowed to happen. So we go through the MCDS, right? So that's the money. Why is it allowed to happen? Because Congress is corrupt. They are bought off by these same interests. What's our demand? Stop it, right? End the corruption. And what's the solution is we have to cut those puppet strings between the billionaires and our government and turn it into our government, really, for the first. I was going to say turn it back into our government, but it's like turn it into our government for maybe the first time.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, within the United States history, has the government ever been for the entirety of the people? No, it's just been for a very small subset of people. And it's been like that ever since its inception. It's just we've been fooled into thinking that it's for all, when in reality it never has been.
Yep.
I mean, the early, you know, machinations of power were all, you know, for landowners, which, you know, we know what that means is, you know, white men pretty much. And nothing really has changed in a significant way.
Yeah, definitely. I
tell you what has changed, though, is people be knowing now. You cannot keep this information under wraps anymore. Yep. Everybody knows what's going on, and it's the information age, and that is a huge deal.
Because we can read now.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point. I always think about this as just kind of like a thought experiment, and like we're kind of like equally in like a very propaganda space, but also like you know, like Eric was saying, just this information age where we have everything in our pocket. So it ends up kind of being this weird thing where sometimes people are like simultaneously incredibly informed, but also misinformed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some of those propagandized people in the world teaching in universities.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
But there are a lot of good ones too. It's, you know, it's another thing. Like we also need to keep hope in this, and that we're not alone. Like there are a ton of people who are thinking like we do, and more. And every time someone sees a show like this, every time someone, you know, watches Savvy Sabs or RBN and the other networks, like there's light bulbs going off. And now it's up to the real left to show a path to real change.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that is important about shows like this, because it's not the sexy subject, right? But it's the most important subject. I liken it to chicken noodle soup, right? Where it's like, it's not fun like pizza, right? It's not, you know, you don't have all the spicy like drama, right? But it's the answers that actually address the real foundations that's necessary for us to make real change. And as somebody who is radical, I'll put it lightly, this is some of the last resorts that we have before anything else happens. So I think it behooves people to listen to people like Eric and Cory, because what else can happen otherwise? And so this is one of the reasons why I felt it necessary also to have you on, because I want us to exhaust all of our options first, to see what we can do. And so I just want to once again want to thank y'all, in the middle of this, because it is deeply important. I want to move on to the next one about response to the climate emergency. And so this one's pretty much self-explanatory as well. But when you guys talk about the Green New Deal, are you talking about what the Democrats say is the Green New Deal?
No, we'd be talking about the real Green New Deal. So you had, you had the Green Party who came up with it at first, but that word non-corporate is really important in there, in that it can't. If you're focusing on that, I think it helps a lot. That's where the rubber really hits the road. And so when you have, the Democratic Party, there'll be their idea of a Green New Deal is to throw crumbs at us like carbon offsets or something. It's
yeah.
But yeah, and the Green New Deal plans and programs are out there. There's also stuff like you can turn it into a jobs program. Is one of the things we should be talking about a lot on the left is we should have a full up national jobs program. And there are lots of things that people could be doing, in the green space. There's tons of things of, expanding green energy and solar and these things. In the research space, there's tons of things people could be doing. Infrastructure, it's a target-rich environment.
Yeah, and one of the things I actually was talking to a comrade over the weekend. And one of the things that we were mentioning, and it's one of the things that I said many times before, but is that in a more egalitarian system, we would realize that our primary enemy is climate change. And that's the only war we really should be engaging with. And so we should be exchanging the rifles that our soldiers have for shovels. And we should be in a project of replanting the entire planet and cleaning up what we have. Because despite what Elon Musk says, we're not getting to Mars. We're not getting to these other different planets. And if we were to get to these other planets, the billionaires would go by themselves. They would leave us here. And so I think it's behooves
or they would
us.
start wrecking them.
Yeah, it's up to us to fix what we have here. Right now, if they want to ship off to Mars, all right, fine. But make sure that that's a one-way trip. because I don't want them to come back. So, but my point being is like, this is the only home we got. This rock is all we got. Ooh, I should put that on a shirt.
Rock is all we got.
This rock is all we got. And then put planet Earth on the shirt.
Nice. All right.
See what you did there? See what you two?
Collaboration.
Y'all get my brain working. Y'all get my brain working. I love it. Yeah.
I'm an engineer, and I, my brain also tends to go to tech things, and we have the technology to fix these things, to do amazing things. We could solve really any problem, but the combination of people power, brain power, and tech. But it has to be technology for the good of working people, for the good of that 99%. Yeah. And right now in corporate America, absolutely nothing gets done unless it benefits a billionaire. Like, it has to increase that quarter's profits. Everything is about shareholder profits for the quarter. Yeah. And that's the big thing that we need to deal with, to change. And if we can do that, if we can get over that hump and leverage technology to our advantage, our being the 99%, incredible things are possible. That I think there's sometimes a lack of imagination, even on the real left, about what's possible. Like we can do amazing things.
Yeah,
or we can have billionaires.
Yeah. And also, it's we try to sometimes talk about getting out of the scarcity mindset, which is something that capital's put out there. And that's not to say that resources are unlimited. That's definitely not true. But this is the richest country in the world, and we do have enough for everybody here. If it wasn't so wealth inequality and whatnot.
And keep in mind, the billionaires are literally richer than ever. I got the chart on one of the 11 Demand Substack posts of the billionaire wealth, and it is just up and up and up. So if you want to know where the money and resources are, that's where they're going.
Yeah, I think they're on track to be trillionaires soon. A few of them, like Bezos and Musk. Yeah.
And it's not about anything violent or anything like that. It's about the wealth inequality. It's about preventing the 99% getting their act together and preventing those top 0.1% of those billionaires from stealing so much money from us. And so the only way you can really do that is to decorrupt the government. All roads lead back to that, and that's why I always say it's MCDS and always connect those dots.
Yeah. This is absolutely true. Fully agree. Want to move on to the next one. Racial and criminal justice reform. This one, some people may get a little antsy about this, but this is a tough conversation that we have to have. It says provide reparations for ADOS, which is American Descendants of Slavery, be a solution that treats them as what they are, a debt owed, address brutal treatment of indigenous peoples with land back programs and other solutions, in mass incarceration, and address the root cause of crime, poverty, cut police budgets and reallocate the resources to the community, demand that unjustified shootings of unarmed individuals result in the firing of police department officials in the chain of command, up to and including the police chief, commissioner, and demand the resignation of the mayor, in the drug war, and enact 10 demands for justice. Of course, that is 10 demands for justice was co-authored by Nick of RBN, one of my comrades there.
Yeah, and big shout out for them on that one. I mean, that was, an inspiration for my demands, was what they were doing.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
and definitely. that one about demand the resignation of the police chief and on up the chain of command. It's amazing to me that doesn't come up. I mean, I feel like anytime these incidents happen and it's clearly something really bad happened, we should say, the police chief, you're gone. Sorry, you may mean well, you may be a nice guy, whatnot, but your guy effed up. and let's, time to give someone else a turn. And if you started doing that and even demand to get the mayor out of there, you would start seeing some real change, because it's going to affect them, the leadership.
Yeah, it's also, the disproportionate policing that happens depending on what community or what place you're talking about. But I do believe, especially when it comes to the war on drugs, that, certain groups were very much targeted, and it broke up families. It destroyed the family unit, created generational trauma, and furthermore perpetuated generational poverty. And the denial of resources. So I do think that the criminal justice system, going back to the Fugitive Slave Act, is pretty much been out there, enforcing that certain groups are not going to be able to get wealth.
Absolutely. This also kind of goes in line with it disempowers institutions like the CIA, which have been known to traffic drugs within our neighborhoods, and also certain police institutions, like, for instance, the police in South Florida, that actually right now are being sued for manufacturing crack cocaine in their precincts in order to sell it on the streets. And so this just it really just puts the power back into the hands of the people. Anybody who's suffering from any type of drug addiction, it is treated as a medical issue, not a criminal issue. And so this is also very powerful. And I think that, this bleeds into, I don't think that's the right word I should use. This dominoes into, what it can be for communities that are, not racialized. Like, for instance, I think of a lot of the people who live in places like Appalachia, right? There's a lot of people who are working class and working poor white people, and they are also burdened by the police. They are also burdened by drugs. And when you do a lot of these policies that would, of course, it would benefit those of us who are Black, especially those of us who are American descendants of slavery. But for instance, cut police budgets and reallocate the resources to the community. This also would be a huge boom to poor and working class white communities as well. Because if you're going to do it for us, that means that the white communities are going to want it for themselves, which is only fair. And so this is also going to be a huge boom and help for them, and giving them a boost, or really not a boost, but bringing up to where they should be as far as, the living standards in America, where it should be for working people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, also, it's like the Fred Hampton vision of class solidarity over racial solidarity, which is very good. But also on these issues, we defer to experts. Like, for example, on like reparations, we're very pro reparations, but obviously we're not economists, and also the Black experience is not my experience. So, for example, for reparations, we tend to say that we go along with the work of Sandy Darity. So with issues like this too, it's also like part of it is expanding out to those subject matter experts and deferring to them. So it's like we have the framework of an idea, and then it'll be backed up further by the subject matter experts.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's really not a mystery how to deal with reparations. It's about political will. People have been studying it for decades. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's go on to the next one. I just want to get to this one here. Rejection, censorship. That's pretty much self-explanatory too, especially when you have one side of the coin that says that, oh, we're going to reject censorship, but then when it comes to silencing certain people, then they want to reject censorship, then they want to encourage censorship, versus the other side of the coin. So, it's really making it more across the board. That's what I can see here.
And it's both parties. I mean, one key example is you can see, Trump had a term, Biden had a term. They both had ample opportunity to pardon Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. And, what did they do about it? All they do is vilify them. So it's a bipartisan thing. They love censorship. The billionaires and their servants love censorship because they hate the peasants. They don't want the peasants getting out there and mouthing off and stirring up trouble. And so, it's.
But that's our constitutional right, Eric. Like I'll be honest with you.
Started with that, didn't it?
It's our constitutional right to mouth off. Right?
That's
for
American.
People who go, you don't want them talking too much. I'm like, no, that's
totalitarian. Misinformation.
Yeah, I mean, civil disobedience is kind of like of a very like American ethic, I think. I mean, it's, the right to protest and whatnot. I think that's kind of built into it. Unfortunately, it does get, weaponized depending on what you're protesting. For example, pro-Palestine protests have been pretty suppressed. Black Lives Matter protests have been pretty suppressed. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the concept that it is very American, or at least it should be very American, to just kind of get up and say, hey, fuck you guys. You're not doing it right, and these are our demands.
Yeah, it's like, don't come to me and ask me to celebrate a bunch of dudes dumping tea into the Boston Harbor in civil disobedience, but then when I mouth off against my government, then you want to silence me. Like, no. It doesn't work like that. If you want me to celebrate them, then you have to allow me to be able to do and say what they allegedly fought for. Because if you're not, then that means that you are no different than King George, who was putting down an iron fist on the 13 colonies. Because that's not right. And so that's what I see. I see that in Biden and I see that in Trump. It's just they're doing it in different ways, but they're doing basically the same thing. And of course, they're doing it against anybody who says anything against Israel. That's one of the things, right? But on top of that, they're also trying to censor anybody that tries to uphold anything that is antithetical to the capitalist system. And so they'll do this also by encouraging algorithms, with big tech, so that anybody that says anything against capitalism, well, then you get suppressed, right? You actually talk about here about the algorithms, which is something a lot of people don't talk about. It says prohibit government agencies from using big tech companies for backdoor censorship, regulate algorithms that impact user interactions, and open them up to public scrutiny. You're talking about open source, aren't you, Eric? Cory.
Yep. Yeah, these algorithms are black boxes. And I don't think people even realize how powerful these algorithms are. Like, for instance, if YouTube somehow, let's say a hacker got in and decided to recommend this live video to, like, I don't know, 50% of the people on YouTube, this video would all of a sudden blow up and have like 1 million views. I mean, it is that powerful. And conversely, you can have the best, most inspiring video in the world, and if the algorithm doesn't like it because it's not advertiser friendly, then it doesn't get recommended, and it kind of sits there. So yeah, these algorithms are huge. It's all part of breaking up, regulating, democratizing, nationalizing things like YouTube and social media companies. They are the new public commons, right? They are what free speech is today, and we need to treat them as such and not just let them be playthings of billionaires like Elon Musk.
Yep, absolutely.
That's the demand.
Yeah. You want to add things to that, Cory?
I defer to Eric on the open source stuff. He's really the tech guy.
And yeah, of course, open source, anything like that. Well, the more eyes on it, the better.
Let's deep seek it. Immigration reform, abolish ICE, stop interfering with destabilizing countries in Latin America's path to safe. Sorry, can't talk today. provide a path to citizenship for all persons in the United States, protect asylum seekers and process claims in a timely and just manner, and demilitarize the border. So there's a lot of people who have this view that thinks that once we deport all the quote unquote illegals, then our country will somehow be better for the rest of us. While that may happen in the short term, as somebody who is an anti-capitalist, I trust a snake to be a snake. And that snake being, the cappies, they like to exploit. So therefore, if the people who they're exploiting the most are no longer here, they're going to find another group to exploit. That's what I see.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Judy.
No, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I know this is kind of a touchy topic lately, and especially because there is a lot of a feeling that people that have recently immigrated or granted asylum in the country are getting resources that people that were born and raised here are not necessarily doing that. And it is definitely in some cases true, and it's definitely not right, and it's definitely not fair. What I do try to push is the class solidarity, and to not have the immigrants be the straw man. I mean, again, this is something that we really should be demanding of the government, that these are opportunities that should be given to everybody. But yeah, it kind of has created this this sort of, yeah, it's a tough issue. I mean, even here in the Boston area, a lot of hotels and whatnot have been converted into housing for these groups. And we also have the Mass and Cass area in Boston, known as Methadone Mile, where people that are born and raised in America are stuck out on the streets. So it is definitely a real problem, and something that we have to address. And I don't have any big answers for that. I just always try to encourage people to just focus on the class issues over the issues over that, because if everything's working properly, I really believe in the whole American ethos of bring your tired, you're sick, you're poor. I would love this country to be a place of that real land of opportunity for anybody that wants to participate in society.
Yeah, to address that point, for instance, I think it was Sabia was talking about how, and I think this is true, is that there's some people who may be immigrants that may come here and they get a 10-year deferment on their taxes, or if they're come here as undocumented, they get stay in maybe a hotel. And when people think about a hotel, they're thinking somehow some 5-star room. It's no, right? And then they may get EBT benefits, which at max, they're probably getting maybe $300, $400 a month just in EBT benefits, right? But with that being said, it's okay, they can give that to them, but they're not giving that to you. Why aren't they giving that to you? Is it the fault of the immigrants, or is it the fault of the people who are exploiting them, trying to exploit them, that is trying to pull them in, right? Because I'll put it like this. For those of us that watched The Lion King back in the day, remember that part where Simba was in the valley and he was practicing his roars? And then you had the bison that were way up at the top, but the bison started coming in, right? Was it the bison's fault that they were coming down into that valley? No. Who was behind the bison, nipping at them and snapping their teeth at them? It was the hyenas, right? The hyenas were the ones that were causing the bison to come down into that valley, that made it a danger for Simba. So it's the same thing. These corporations are the hyenas, and they're behind the immigrants, pushing them into the country in order to basically pit one group against another. And so when we talk about this, it's number one, if we're going to talk about deportation, I think we should deport the people who are actually trying to exploit the immigrants. If we're going to deport anybody, deport them to Mars, first of all. Number one. Number two, when it comes to immigrants getting more, it's number one, I don't think it's that much more. But at the same time, this country shows that they can actually provide for everybody while they just provide for a small few in order to separate, because this is exactly what they did in African tribes, right? In order to pit one tribe against another, they would give one tribe a little bit more than they did the other, or they would give tribe something where the other tribe got nothing. And this would create resentment between the two. Once you create resentment between the two, then they are fighting against each other instead of the person that put them against each other in the first place. And so when we talk about, when we start to demonize people who really don't have much power against one another, you're really doing the job of the oligarchs. You're doing the job of the corporate dictators, because they don't want you pointing the finger at them, and they don't want you joining forces. And so then you mix that in with them whispering to the ear of the immigrants, well, these people, these black people, they're not that great. So then next thing you know, you got anti-blackness, right? Then they're saying to us, well, these immigrants, they're talking shit about you. Next thing you know, we're like, oh man, these immigrants, they're anti-black. So then we gotta be against them. And then next thing you know, the division keeps growing and growing and growing. Next thing you know, you have a bunch of people who really have no power that are against another group of people who don't have power either. And then next thing you know, we're in a situation where we're in right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And there are real solutions to these things. Things like housing first programs, things like simply deciding as a state or as a federal government that we're going to build a whole bunch of quality public housing. Like if we just made that decision as a society, build it. We got lots of land, we got lots of resources. We can make the billionaires pay for it. If you're worried about the money, if you build a whole ton of quality public housing, that would transform, this whole situation. A big reason that doesn't happen is that would have a potential effect on the housing market. You've got a huge real estate lobby. Now you've got corporations buying housing and using it as investments that are working against that. And it comes, back to the corruption. And so it's about getting the government to work for us and not for them, for that 0.1% corporate oligarchic class. It always comes back to that. But there are real solutions out there.
But another point I just want to hammer home too is a lot of times people will go, well, we don't have enough money for everybody. It's like, no, we do. The funny part is everybody wants to talk about, oh, we don't have enough. But the thing is like, that's when, what some abusive parents do is they will give their kids abusive parents will give their kids very little and say, we don't have enough. Where meanwhile, at night, they're having big ass dinners with cornucopias of food while the kids are inside the bedroom starving and making it seem like that they don't have much. There's a myth of scarcity within this country. If we can dump $4 trillion into the market in March of 2020, you don't think that we actually can't provide for all the people who's actually been here who are undocumented? Like my thing is like, first of all, we can actually change the immigration system so that they won't have to come here undocumented if we stop destabilizing. And once we actually do that, then we also can make sure that the people who are here because they fled here because of whatever situations that were primarily done by our government, then we could help them out. But we can also still help out our same people here at the same time. And it's not an either or, it could be a yes and situation. But the problem is that division that we were talking about.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things that Trump did in his first term was cut those checks. He basically just proved that the government could just cut us all $1,000 check
anytime they want.
And anytime they want. And so, regardless of feelings over Trump, and I voted for Jill Stein. I hate both parties, but some people voted for the Donald because he did that, and he just made that point that the government could do it if they wanted to.
And remember, it's our government and it's our money. It's not the corporation's money. It's not the billionaires' money. That's
What
our
did J.D. Wentworth say? It's your money. Use it when you need it.
Yeah, J.D. Wentworth. Yeah.
I have a structured settlement and I need cash now.
I never see those commercials anymore.
No, because we all know how much of a crock it is. But 9 says an election system we can trust. Of course, you guys talk about making voting machines and software open source. That's music to my ears. Implement ranked choice and star voting systems. Promote, expand ballot initiatives in all states. Open up ballot access and debates to all candidates, regardless of party affiliation, and enact a national popular vote system to fix the electoral college. I say just get rid of the electoral college, period. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be ideal. The reason I put this one in there is because we could do that today. Like that process actually got a certain amount. Like if you go onto that, I'm not you, but if the viewers go onto that link, we don't do it now, but that's actually it's like an interstate compact, and there's actually like about a bunch of states have done that. It would have to be a majority of the states, but if a majority of the states did that, enacted that in their legislature, that could fix the electoral college today by just passing that as an interstate compact is how it works. So my point is, it doesn't always have to be, we got to go through the huge process and it's a constitutional amendment. It'll be years and it's so difficult. Some of these things we really can do now, but it's again, the political will and the 99% demanding these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to add anything else, Cory?
No, I think that sums it up.
All right. Thank you very much.
Keep it moving.
All right. And let's go on to the next one. It says 10, revamp taxation and funding. Let's talk money. It says abolish all taxes except for highly progressive income taxes, wealth taxes, and taxes on large corporations. I want to stop there for a second because one thing I learned about being on Red Note, aka Xiaohongshu, was that the Chinese people were telling me that once you own your home, you don't pay another cent of property tax once you own your home. My question is, why is China living the American dream and America's not?
Something to do with capitalism?
Of course, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have to educate people about what the real purpose of taxes are. And we really need to get out of this mindset that, we have to have all these taxes to pay for things. The federal government, it doesn't run that way. To the extent that the states run that way, that's really a policy choice. It doesn't even have to be that way at the state level. Mm-hmm. Kiva's calling a box. Can you hear that? Anyways, don't mind the noise. It's Kiva the cat. She's clawing away at inappropriate taxes. No, but yeah, it's and so the purpose of the taxes is to cycle the money back in, and we can arrange that however we want. And so if we did something like this kind of radical change that's in that first item, it would change taxes from being a driver of wealth inequality into something that fixes wealth inequality.
Yeah. And the China thing, I definitely, at least personally, don't view China as a perfect state. I think there are definitely things they do better than us and some things they do worse. But I do think that China really does have like a housing first mentality. And I do think that they view housing as more of a right of the citizenry. So I definitely think that that's the mentality that they have, that in China, you do not have to be unhoused if you don't want to be. Whereas, unfortunately, in the United States, the government, state, local, and federal has proven that they kind of don't give a shit if some Americans are unhoused and on the streets.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. I especially wanted to touch on that. So eliminate tax loopholes, of course, prosecute and potentially expel persons and corporations that abuse offshore tax havens. Don't promise me with a good time, guys. Charter a network of state-level public banks to benefit local communities and businesses and issue federal currency to promote a public good, not increase private profits. This is music to my ears.
And I tell you, man, a big part of billionaires being billionaires is sucking in that federal money and taking it, right out of the Fed, essentially. A whole ton of money goes right from the Fed right into billionaire hands, essentially.
Yep, absolutely. And dial it up to 11. Democratize the enterprise. I like that. That rhymes. It says
I
provide
think I get
federal.
that from Richard Wolff.
I know Eric was in his bag when he wrote that one. Says provide federal funds and incentives for employee-owned and controlled businesses. Enforcing
That's actually a big one. There's actually a bunch of companies out there, and they'll advertise, "Oh, we're employee owned," and what they've done is they essentially sold the company to the employees, but they kept the management structure in place as like this zombie management structure, and it's the same board, it's the same manager, and so they're employee quote unquote own, but the employees have no control over the company. And it sounds crazy and weird, but there are companies doing this, and I mean, I guess it's a slight improvement, but just be aware if you see that employee, like you'll say 100% employee owned, ask the question, okay, but is it employee controlled? And more often than not, with these ones that are making these big advertisements about that, it's not. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I've been noticing that.
Yeah, I actually talked about this. Was it last year or the year before? Well, I talked about the difference between employee stock ownership, I think it's called ESOs, versus employee owned and operated, which is a worker cooperative. And so the difference is like, for instance, here in Florida, we have a famous store called Publix Supermarket. And Publix Supermarket, they give stock options to their employees, and they say it's employee owned, when in reality, it's not employee operated, though, meaning that they don't have a democratized way of operating the entire company. So it's still operated from the top down. It's just, employees got, some shares in the stock. That's it. And they really don't have the control that they should have in a democratized fashion within an organization like Publix. And I think that we should change that so that it is employee owned and democratized fully, so that each employee equals one vote from the top all the way to the bottom.
Yeah, and it becomes all convoluted. I always say if a law requires you to have a law degree to understand it, then it is a bad law. And it's kind of the same thing with how they're describing these things as employee owned. It's subterfuge, it's smoke and mirrors, and that's part of the way that the power structure stays in power, is by making things so convoluted and difficult to make any change that a lot of times people don't do it. It's like a bank. Like, let's say you hate your bank, but switching over to another one is just a pain in the ass. So people usually just kind of stay. And it's just the same thing on the same level. Is they're just going to make it so difficult. And so that's why we really need to, on another level, be disobedient.
Absolutely. Let me just finish up here on this number 11. Enforce antitrust laws, break up monopolies and large corporations. I also include companies like Google, in my view.
Google should be about 100 pieces, man, at least.
Oh yeah.
Break them up.
And I also think that YouTube should not be as a monopoly for platforms like this, like it is. And I
Can you imagine a co-op owned and controlled YouTube?
Yeah, like because oh my goodness, what's her name? She was just on Savvy's show recently. She had her channel demonetized.
Blakely?
Yes, Blakely. She was talking about how she got demonetized, and the thing is, one of the things she brought up on Twitter was about how YouTube is essentially a monopoly for content creation, where in reality it should not be. Because if you really believe in competition, then Odyssey, Rumble, Rockfin, Venmo, all these different platforms should also be able to compete and also have, a viewership, that's divided between them and I was going to say Google, but between them and YouTube. But the problem is that they don't, because there's this allowance for a monopolization. And they'll say, well, it's not our fault we're this big. But I'm like, yeah, it is your fault that you're this big, because you were allowed to get this big, because the antitrust laws actually exist and they can be enforced, but you pay the representatives in our government to look the other way.
Or you could say, YouTube is this big, it's this entity, and its size, it's part of its value, let's say. Then you could say, okay, well, first we're going to break it off from Google because no big corporation should own that. But then further, we're going to basically take it over, nationalize it, essentially, like eminent domain. And then we're going to reform it into a employee owned and controlled, worker co-op democratized model. And yeah, it can be this big, but it'll be democratically controlled by everyone who's an employee. You could have, there are ways to organize it with like membership models or things like that, but basically democratize it, one person, one vote. And then it's where the rubber hits the road is like, where do these big decisions get made? Right. Right now, it's, basically a few billionaires is where the buck stops. It's with, there's a board of directors that's appointed by the billionaires, and, everything they do is to benefit, that profit model. Yeah. When you flip this over into democratized, it becomes a very different animal, and YouTube could stay this big and this influential and this useful, but it could be a big, influential, useful platform that benefits the 99%, that becomes, something, that we want it to be. And, and you would demand that there's due process for all kind of demonetizations and all things like that. And you would have enlightened people running it that have been elected via that democratic one person, one vote model.
Yeah. And, sorry, just just on talking about like big companies that are problems. I always like to talk about Amazon Web Services. Some people estimate so AWS. I'm sure most people know about it, but just kind of real basic. It's like the cloud. So instead of like companies used to have their own like servers wherever they were located, now Amazon just has these giant data centers. And so, I think like I've seen that sometimes that like 60% of the internet is basically on AWS. Unfortunately, this live stream is being brought to you by AWS because that's what StreamYard uses. So it's kind of impossible to get away. And AWS is actually where the Amazon makes a chunk of their money, and there's huge like deep state ties and stuff like that. But we're basically having at this point like a monopoly on the internet, which really, at least in my opinion, the internet should be viewed as one of those rights.
Commons.
The commons, basically, just because it's so important to our life that, but the fact that Amazon basically owns the majority chunk of it is like a huge problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking about people like not just Blakely, but people who were demonetized, people like Candace Owens, who has millions of followers, right? It just goes to show that, and it's tougher to, demonetize somebody like her because of her name and recognition, because she's so big. But then that also brings in the class aspect, right? Because how can somebody like a Candace Owens get her monetization back, but Blakely can't? Or I can't. My channel is completely demonetized. And so why can't I get my monetization back, but somebody like a Candace Owens can't? Right? It doesn't make
any sense. That whole due process thing.
Yeah, and it's also that thing too. Well, Candace is kind of a different case, but even within people that are primarily centered around YouTube from the beginning, if you look at people that started like 7 to 10 years ago, they weren't suppressed in the same way that people who started their shows in the last 4 to 5 years were. And so, to your point, that's something that, going back to the algorithm, has just changed so much that,
Yeah.
Now you're just really getting suppression. So it's not that these channels, wouldn't take off because of the content. It's because they won't take off because of the suppression.
Yeah.
And the algorithm.
Yeah, definitely. It's the algorithm. So, and then
And the fixes get back into government. It's
mhm.
the kind of big fix for something like an AWS or YouTube is going to need a government that's on our side. It's the hard reality of it. That's why I keep coming back to it.
Yep, absolutely. And so one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, since last time you and Cory were here, is there anything different that you guys have tweaked as far as the 11 demands, and what can you tell us about it?
Sure. Well, the big thing is that we didn't have last time was MCDS. And we touched on that earlier, but it's that whole framework, money, corruption, demand, solutions, and what it's about is, I'd say like cover, talk about any if you're a YouTuber or if you're talking with friends or anything like that, talk about and cover anything you want, but then always bring it back, always end it with MCDS, in that tie it to the money, because everything ties back to the money. And then you tie it to the corruption. It's always about the billionaires corrupting the government. And then, as importantly, get to the demand, right? If you're talking about something, okay, what's your demand? And it really is amazing to me how many times people, there are YouTubers I like that I really don't watch much anymore because they never get to the demand. They'll spend hours in outlining things and the problems and whatnot, but it doesn't. And it's like you want to shout at the screen, like, what is the demand? Because then when you get to the demand, that automatically pushes you to the solution. And so the key idea behind MCDS is to connect those dots and to get everybody. Like, I feel like 11 demands and MCDS, like, I feel like they're really strong concepts, but they need heroes is the way I'd put it. They need, on the YouTube level, the YouTube space, people like you, JB, and Sabby does this of actually connecting those dots and actually using the framework and getting to that point. And it needs heroes at the personal level of just people just talking with friends and talking about these subjects in general, is the idea of actually using this framework. If you want to bring up on the site, there's 11 Demands Collective. That's kind of about this concept of a thought collective, of this idea that you can be a part of this. You can be a part of this positive change by using this framework. You can be like part of the collective. It's a way of mind. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of connecting the dots. And I just think if imagine if everyone watching, you and Sabby Sabs and RBN just started thinking and talking and framing things this way, I think it could spark something big. Yeah.
So go ahead.
And it's, educate people, in the online world. You can do it in chats, you can do it in messages. If you're the host, you can be putting it out there. In the real world, you can be talking about it. And then just that last part, every discussion of every major issue should finish with MCDS, the money, the corruption, the demand, solutions. Any discussion that doesn't finish there, we should view as a missed opportunity. And the end game is to reach a critical mass of people thinking this way, demanding an end to the corruption, and forming this kind of a big movement. So that's kind of the big idea.
My question, though, and this is probably going to be my final question, but when it comes to demands, my thing is, and maybe this is just a radical in me, but when we say we demand such and such, or else what is the consequence for these entities, for these institutions that do not meet our demands. Because the thing is like, I can make demands all day, but what is the consequence for these demands not being met? What will we do in order to punish them for not meeting our demands?
Well, that's where the movement comes in, right? It's the prerequisite to being able to back up the demands is having people behind them. This is where our job, in educating people, in getting people tied into it. And the idea would be, get in the streets, muck things up, not vote for people is a big thing. I mean, you could say that part of a big reason why Kamala lost the election was because people demanded an end to the genocide. And there was a consequence. I think they could have, won that election if they had simply tamped down the genocide, and they couldn't even do that. But the thing is, it starts with the demands. Like you can say, well, we got nothing backing it up. Well, I mean, so what? We shouldn't have demands. I mean, we have to, we have to start somewhere and make that spark and go from there.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I think this is a great jump off for people who want to know like what needs to happen. What could we focus on, and what could be the demands so that we can have a more egalitarian system so that we aren't suffering anymore. And it's one thing for you, like let's say for instance, you're somebody that's affluent and you're not suffering. But what about your family members? What about your friends? What about your neighbors? Because the thing is, it's like, it's one thing for you not to suffer, but then you see other people suffering, and that can also have an effect on you, an effect on you emotionally and mentally. So it's not just for those of us who are going through it, but it should be for also those of us who have empathy and feel for our fellow Americans within this country, so that we can actually change things so that they're also not suffering too. Maybe I'm just a softie.
Most people want to do good, to have the world be a good place. I really do think that, yes, there's a certain percentage that aren't that way. And there's a really bad, powerful sociopathic percentage, the billionaires who, grab this power. But I think, on the whole, most people want, to do good, to have the world be a good place, to not have it be a brutal place. And, that's the energy that we need to tap into.
Gotcha. So where can they find you? What is coming up next and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so 11 Demands, you can search it up. You can go to, 11demands.org. It's pretty easy to find there, and there are links to everything there. I would say, for action items, you can join the 11 Demands Thought Collective by, just what I described, and using the terminology and trying to, let's make this a real thing. And definitely sign up for the 11 Demands Substack. And they'll be posting updates on that probably a couple times a week. They're short, don't worry, doesn't blow up your email box. And Jaybefaunt put in my Twitter link as well. And we're not hard to find. And of course, we're always around on Sabby Sabs.
Definitely.
And let's get James to Seattle.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm gonna get there, and I'm gonna head on back. But thank you so much, Eric and Cory. It is good to have you guys on again. It's always good to see you guys in the chat when I'm watching Savvy, and it's good to see you come in and talk about towards the end, to talk about different things and different perspectives, and put it into the perspective of money corruption, demands, and solutions.
We also have the Zoom Hangouts. After like once a week, we have the Zoom Hangout. So if anyone wants to interact with us directly, you can catch us in there too. Say your bit.
Yeah, y'all party hard in there too, I heard.
Sometimes.
Thanks, JB. It's a great to see you. It's always a pleasure, and just wish you all the best.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. So good to see you guys. I'll see you guys a little bit later.
Thanks, JB. See you soon.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.